All right, so we've got a pretty interesting collection of stuff to get through today about Elon Musk.
Yeah, looks like quite the deep dive.
We've got some Wall Street Journal, a Guardian piece,
Uh-huh.
some analysis from Vox about the Pentagon and SpaceX,
Okay.
and even some excerpts from Wernher von Braun's The Mars Project.
The Mars Project.
So this should be interesting. It's a complex dude.
Yeah, definitely. One of the first things that kind of jumps out at me is this whole thing about Musk's security clearance, or should I say lack thereof.
Yeah.
You know, SpaceX launches all these payloads for the military and intelligence agencies,
Right.
but Musk himself doesn't have the highest level of clearance.
You'd think that the head of a company so entwined with national security would have like full access. What's the deal with that?
Well, it seems like the lawyers for SpaceX actually advised Musk against pursuing that top-level clearance.
Huh.
Apparently, there were concerns about potential disclosures regarding his reported drug use, and also contacts with foreign nationals like Vladimir Putin.
Drug use and Putin. I was not expecting to see those two things mentioned in an article about government contracts.
Yeah, it's a little bit surprising, to say the least.
Yeah.
There are reports out there about him using various substances,
Okay.
including marijuana, ketamine, even psychedelics. Now, his lawyers, they've refuted some of these claims,
Right.
stating that he's never failed a drug test at SpaceX. And as for Putin, the Wall Street Journal does mention some regular contact between the two of them going back to 2022.
Wow, that is quite a web of connections.
Mm.
But you know what? With Trump back in office now, this whole security clearance thing might be a moot point.
Oh, that's true. That's a good point. I mean, don't forget, Musk was a pretty big donor to Trump's re-election campaign.
Right.
And the word on the street is he's probably going to be tapped to head this new Department of Government Efficiency.
Really?
So with that relationship with Trump, he might be granted access to classified information directly by the president, kind of bypassing all the usual processes and checks.
So the political ties could grant him more access than an official clearance.
Yeah, potentially.
Interesting. So what about his political affiliations more broadly? What other activities has he been up to?
Well, there was that whole thing with his endorsement of the Alternative for Germany party, the AfD.
Yeah, the AFD.
Which is a pretty controversial move.
Yeah.
They're considered far right.
Right.
And have some pretty contentious stances. So a lot of people are kind of raising their eyebrows at that and questioning his political leanings.
Yeah, it certainly makes you wonder. Speaking of raising eyebrows, one of these articles you sent over draws a pretty bold comparison between Musk and other wealthy donors in America and the Russian oligarchs of the 1990s.
Right. That was a really interesting article. It basically argues that these American oligarchs, even though they come from these innovative industries, they actually benefit a lot from government support, and they use Tesla and SpaceX as their main examples.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they point to tax credits for electric vehicles, government subsidized loans,
Right.
and of course those massive contracts that SpaceX gets.
So they build their empires with a helping hand from the government. And then what?
Well, the article suggests they then use their wealth and influence, especially through new media platforms, to kind of shape public perception.
Okay.
And maybe even weaken the institutions that are supposed to regulate their businesses.
It makes you think about the balance of power. Who's really benefiting from the system?
For sure. So now, let's shift gears a little bit and talk about Mars. It might seem kind of like a departure from the political stuff, but there are actually some really fascinating connections here.
Okay.
We have these excerpts from Wernher von Braun's book, The Mars Project.
Right.
And the parallels with Musk's ideas are, well, let's just say they're intriguing.
All right, I'm all ears. What's the connection between Musk and this former Nazi rocket scientist?
It's a bit of a historical curiosity.
Okay.
So von Braun's book describes a future Martian society that's a technocracy, and there's no regional representation because of advanced technology and the fact that everyone is living underground. And get this, Musk's father, Errol, revealed that Elon was actually named after the leader in von Braun's book.
Wow, that is just a crazy coincidence.
It really is.
Like naming your child after a character from a sci-fi book written by a former Nazi scientist. It's kind of strange.
You do have to wonder about the origins of some of his vision. You know, von Braun's vision with a technologically advanced society and limited regional representation.
It does sound a lot like Peter Thiel's idea of network states.
Right.
And even some of Musk's own ventures like Hyperloop and the Boring Company.
Exactly.
It really makes you wonder if he's consciously or unconsciously trying to bring this vision from the Mars project to life here on Earth.
Yeah, I mean, it almost seems like he's following some kind of blueprint that was laid out decades ago. This is getting really interesting. So we've got Musk, who's named after this fictional character in a book by a former Nazi. He might be getting access to all the sensitive information through his ties to Trump, and he might even be trying to reshape society based on this whole technocratic vision. Is there anything else?
Anything else we're missing?
Well, we haven't even touched on his pro-natalist stance.
Oh, right.
Like, both he and his dad believe that humanity's purpose is basically reproduction.
Yeah, Elon Musk did say something like, the only reason we're on Earth is to reproduce, or something like that. Pretty stark.
It is, yeah. And it kind of makes you wonder about what's driving his ambition to colonize Mars.
Yeah.
Is it just about saving humanity from a dying planet?
Right.
Or is there something more to it? Maybe he wants to create this new breeding ground for humanity, on another planet.
Yeah. Okay, so maybe Mars isn't just about escaping a dying Earth. Maybe it really is about starting fresh somewhere else. Although his recent support for H-1B visas, the ones that let companies hire foreign workers, that seems to contradict the whole pro-natalist thing, doesn't it? At least for some people.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. His stance on H-1B visas has definitely put off some of his MAGA supporters.
Right.
So, yeah, there's definitely some conflicts there within his political alliances.
Yeah, it's almost like he's caught between these two worlds.
Right.
The tech-focused world of space exploration and then the nationalist world of Trump and Make America Great Again. Yeah. And those two don't really seem to mix very well.
No, they don't. And figuring out those contradictions definitely makes it harder to understand Elon Musk.
For sure.
It's really a fascinating puzzle trying to figure out Musk's motivations and ideology.
Yeah. Yeah.
And speaking of puzzles,
Yep.
we haven't really even touched on the whole issue of taxes.
Right.
Which comes up in a few of these sources.
Oh, right. Yeah, there's that report from Americans for Tax Fairness and the one from the EU Tax Observatory. Both are kind of sounding the alarm about how the tax system is skewed in favor of the super rich.
Exactly. Like the Americans for Tax Fairness report, they're arguing that corporations are using all these loopholes to shift profits overseas and dodge U.S. taxes.
Right.
Plus, they point to how the estate tax has been weakened, which lets these massive fortunes get passed down through generations without much being taxed.
Yeah, and the EU Tax Observatory report is saying pretty much the same thing, but on like a global scale.
Right.
They say billionaires around the world are paying way less of their wealth in taxes compared to everyone else.
Yeah.
They even suggest a minimum wealth tax on billionaires as a possible solution.
It's kind of amazing how these reports, even though they're from different organizations with different perspectives, they both agree that the tax system is broken and needs to be fixed.
It does paint a pretty grim picture.
Yeah.
It's like the system is rigged to protect the wealth of the elite at everyone else's expense.
Yeah, it's a system that just makes wealth inequality worse.
Right.
And it all kind of circles back to what we were talking about earlier with Musk and that idea of oligarchy.
Yeah.
I mean, if these super rich people can use their money to influence the government and change the tax system to benefit themselves,
then they're basically just making the rules to help themselves get richer and richer.
Exactly. And then it just widens the gap between the haves and the have-nots even more.
Yeah.
And this brings us back to Musk's pro-natalist views, the whole idea that humanity's main purpose is just to make more humans.
Right. Both him and his father have been pretty vocal about that.
Yeah, Elon Musk said something like, the only reason we're on Earth is to reproduce.
Yeah, it's a pretty extreme viewpoint.
It is.
Yeah.
And it kind of makes you think about why Elon is so obsessed with colonizing Mars.
Yeah.
Is it really about saving humanity from a dying planet? Or could there be like a deeper, more complex motivation? Well, what if he's trying to create a new breeding ground for the human race, but with like a specific vision for who gets to thrive in this new world?
So you're saying there might be some kind of selection process in his vision for Mars?
I'm not saying that directly, but it's definitely a question we're thinking about.
Yeah, it does raise some serious ethical concerns.
For sure.
And it comes back to that whole discussion about oligarchy again.
Yeah.
What happens if it's just a small group of elites who get to decide the future of humanity?
That's the big question, isn't it? And it shows just how important it is to really think critically about these ideas and what they could mean for the future. We can't just sit back and accept whatever narratives we're given, especially when they could have such a big impact on humanity.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. This deep dive is really taking us down some pretty wild paths today.
It has.
I mean, we started talking about security clearances, and now we're talking about, like, the future of humanity
I know, it's crazy.
and power dynamics on Mars.
Yeah, it really is all connected, though, isn't it? Like, to understand what Musk is doing and what his ideas really mean, you have to look at the bigger picture, right? Like wealth inequality, the growing influence of technology, and this potential shift in power to just a small group of people.
Yeah, it's honestly a lot to take in.
I know.
And it kind of makes you wonder, what can we even do about it? Do we have any power to change things?
I think we do. It starts with being aware of what's going on, like reading these articles you shared, having these conversations, and really thinking critically about the information we're consuming.
So we need to be more proactive, not just passive bystanders.
Exactly. And we have to hold the people in power accountable. We need to demand transparency and challenge those who are just trying to grab more power for themselves. We can't just let them decide the future for everyone.
Yeah, we have to be informed and engaged and use our voices to shape the world we want to live in.
This deep dive has really been eye-opening. It feels like we're at a crossroads.
I agree.
And the choices we make today are going to have a huge impact on the future. Yeah, I think that's right. You know, it makes me think about something from the Mars project. There was that part that talked about how all the advanced technology on Mars had supposedly gotten rid of regional differences and biases, but it never really answers the question. Did it actually get rid of them, or did it just create new forms of inequality?
That's a really good question. And it makes you think that maybe no matter how advanced we get with technology, we're still going to be facing the same human problems. You know, power, inequality, and the fight for a fair and just society.
I think that's a really important point.
As we keep pushing the boundaries of technology and exploring space, it's important to remember the lessons we've learned from the past. And we need to make sure that we're building a future that benefits all of humanity, not just a select few. Thanks for joining us today for this deep dive.